Northern Pakistan has stunning mountains, beautiful lakes, and impressive glaciers. And while it is usually considered a nature, trekking, and mountaineering destination, it also has fascinating culture and history, which are so underrated in my opinion. Everyone always talks about Pakistan's mountains and how beautiful Pakistan is, and don't get me wrong, it is beautiful, and I talk about that as well, but it is also so interesting, and I rarely hear anyone talking about that side of Pakistan. So in this video, I want to talk to you about a place that has all the mountains, lakes, and glaciers, but that also has some truly fascinating history, and I think is one of the most interesting historical sites that I came across during my time in Pakistan, and that is Hunza Valley. If you're new to this channel, hi, my name is Laura, and I've been traveling all over the world for the past few years. In this channel, I post lots of travel vlogs, hidden gems, and travel information videos, so make sure you subscribe if you want more of that. But now, let's go back into the video. But before I start talking to you about Hunza, I want to show you a really cool place that I came across as I was driving to Hunza from Fairy Meadows, which, by the way, Fairy Meadows is also a really cool place in northern Pakistan that I highly recommend you visit. I actually made a whole travel vlog about it. You can watch it in my channel right now. It's the one that I posted right before this one. But the place that I wanted to show you is called the Three Mountain Junction, and it's a place where three of the world's highest mountain ranges come together in one place. So the Karakoram, Himalaya, and the Hindu Kush all in one place, and also where the Gilgit and the Indus rivers come together. So this is the Three Mountain Junction, which is where the Indus River and the Gilgit River meet. So this right here is the Gilgit. This is the Indus, I think, and it's also where the three highest mountain ranges in the world meet. So this mountain right here belongs to one mountain range, this one to the other, and this one to the last. I was hoping there was a sign that would tell me which one is which, because one is the Karakoram, another one is the Himalaya, and another one is the Hindu Kush. But I don't know which one is which right now. After visiting Three Mountain Junction, I also made a brief stop to see the Rakaposhi Glacier at a place called Rakaposhi Glacier Viewpoint. Pretty self-explanatory. But the Rakaposhi Mountain is actually one of the highest mountains in the world. I believe it is the 27th highest mountain in the world, and it is one of the most important peaks in Hunza Valley. Also, fun fact, did you know that Pakistan is the country with the most glaciers in the world outside of the polar regions? But moving on, once I got to Hunza, there were two historical sites that I really wanted to visit, and those were Altit Fort and Baltit Fort. So both of these forts belonged to the same people, so the Royal Family of Hunza, who were called the Mirs of Hunza. And this is where the really fascinating history starts. So something that I didn't know before I traveled to Pakistan is that Hunza was actually an independent state for a very long time, for hundreds and hundreds of years. Because Gilgit Baltistan has so many mountains, many of the valleys here were actually independent valleys. They were independent states, and Hunza was one of them. So Hunza is located at the very north of Pakistan. It follows the Hunza River, and it is very strategically located because it borders the Xinjiang region of China and the Wakhan corridor in Afghanistan, but it is also not far from Tibet or Tajikistan or India. And Hunza also lies at the heart of the Silk Road. So the Silk Roads were a network of roads that connected east to west from antiquity all the way to modern times, and their main goal was to connect places like China and India to Europe for trade and commerce. The reason why they're actually called the Silk Roads is because silk was one of the main exports for China, and these roads was how silk got to Central Asia and the Middle East and Europe, and silk was very, very valuable in all of these places, and it was even used as currency. But there was also a very important trade in spices that came from India and Southeast Asia, and silver, gold, furs, and honey from North and Western Europe. It was also a place where empires were born and later dissolved, such as the Persian, Mongol, or Mughal empires. And crucially, the Silk Roads also allowed for the expansion of many different religions, such as Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, and Zoroastrianism, which is an ancient religion from the Persian times, from modern-day Iran. Hunza specifically was a Buddhist valley for centuries before Islam arrived, and it was actually very important in the expansion of Buddhism throughout Central and Southern Asia. You can still find many remnants of Buddhism and Buddhist art here in Hunza. So for example, in Altit and Baltit fort, you can find many depictions of the Buddha and again from Buddhist art. And this right here, this is in Baltit fort and this is Tibetan art. Hunza was truly a melting pot of different cultures and religious influences from all over the Silk Road, and there were also influences from Hinduism, so you can still see Hindu art or representations of Hindu religion in Altit and Baltit fort today. But if there is one country that Hunza had a particularly close relationship with, and honestly a country that Hunza still has a very close relationship with today, that is China. Like I said earlier, the Hunza Valley borders the Xinjiang region of China, and the road that goes through Hunza actually ends in Kashgar, which is a very important city in this Chinese region, and it was also a super important center in the ancient Silk Road. You can also see lots of Chinese influence in Hunza Valley today, so you can see lots of Chinese food, for example, and when you go on the highway, you see lots of Chinese characters, Chinese flags sometimes, and interestingly, I've also seen Cyrillic or like Russian writing in some highways here in northern Pakistan, which I thought was curious for sure. And you can also find historical remnants and cultural influences from China from centuries ago, like Chinese paper money in Baltit fort. So Hunza and China have had a very friendly relationship for centuries at this point, and in fact, in 1760, the people from Hunza recognized China as their suzerain. So basically, they recognized that they were in some ways under the leadership of China, but they also remained their autonomy in many other ways. And in 1847, the Mir of Hunza, so the king of Hunza, gave nominal allegiance to China, which I thought was so interesting. The people of Hunza and the Hunza royal family helped the Chinese in many ways, like putting down revolts and setting out raids of dubious ethics, but that's history at the end of the day. And the Chinese similarly helped Hunza in many ways as well. They had a very strong allegiance. But then the British made an entrance. So the British Empire in the 19th century invaded much of India and Pakistan, including the Hunza Valley, and the last fully independent ruler of Hunza, who was Mir Safdar Khan, escaped to China after Hunza was invaded by the British. Hunza then became embroiled in something called the Great Game in the late 19th century, which was a rivalry between Britain and Russia for control of Central Asia and the areas north of India. So if you think about it, Hunza really isn't that far away from the old Russian Empire or the former Soviet Union. It's just a few valleys away from Tajikistan, which was part of the former Soviet Union. So that might put into context the Russian writing that I saw in the highways of Hunza. But it wasn't that far from Russia, and it also wasn't far from Britain because Britain invaded Hunza. That is actually how the Wakhan corridor in Afghanistan was born. So the area of Afghanistan that Hunza borders is called the Wakhan corridor, and it is a very narrow strip of land that connects Afghanistan to China, and it separates Tajikistan from Pakistan. Tajikistan back then again, part of Russia. Pakistan, back in the day, part of Britain. So the Wakhan corridor was a buffer between Russia and Britain and is now part of Afghanistan, but it is very much an artificial part of Afghanistan, if that makes sense. I hope I explained this well. So under the British, Hunza was a protectorate, meaning that the British allowed the Mirs of Hunza, the Royal Family of Hunza, to still rule in the area and retain some degree of autonomy, but they were under the leadership of the British. And the way the British worked, if the Mirs of Hunza did anything the British didn't like, they would be replaced. So that's how it was under the British Empire. And back then, Hunza was part of British India, which comprises modern-day Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. So the British made all of this into one empire. In 1947, Pakistan gained independence from the British, and so Hunza did as well. And I'm not going to get too much into it, but this was a particularly tumultuous time for Pakistan because Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, like I said, were one country under the British Empire, but when the British left, they created a border between Pakistan and India, which was extremely, extremely contentious. It is still extremely controversial to this day, and it left hundreds of thousands, if not millions, dead and millions more displaced. The conflict that ensued after that was absolutely brutal, and it was a horrendous time for both countries. As I'm sure you know, India and Pakistan do not have the best of relationships today. I'm not going to get into it. I have nothing but respect for both countries, but it is important to note in the history of Hunza that Hunza is part of the region of Gilgit Baltistan, which is claimed by the Indian government. So the Indian government claims the whole of Gilgit Baltistan as part of India. I'm well aware that the mere mention of Pakistan and India claiming Gilgit Baltistan and Hunza as a part of India is going to create a lot of discussion in the comments. Feel free to discuss as long as you are kind. If you are hateful towards any country, I will block you. I totally understand that people have different opinions, but you can express those opinions kindly. The fact that India claims Gilgit Baltistan as part of its own territory, and that includes Hunza, of course, is very important to understand the situation that Hunza is in today. So today, Hunza is no longer an independent state. The Royal Family of Hunza had some authority until 1974, and since then, the Pakistani government is the only one that has authority in Hunza. I mean, I'm sure there's regional government as well, but the ultimate authority is in the Pakistani central government. And Hunza and the whole of Pakistan still have a very close relationship with China. Hunza still has a super strategic geographical location, and the fact that Pakistan and China share a border is very, very important for both countries, especially since China's Belt and Road Initiative, which is essentially a modern version of the Silk Road. China's Belt and Road Initiative is basically a way for China to search for new trade routes, and one of the most important trade routes goes through Hunza and through Pakistan. China actually built the segment of the Karakoram Highway that goes through Hunza. That road is also called the Pakistan-China Friendship Road, and it goes from Kashgar in China to Gwadar Port in the Persian Gulf in Pakistan. And China intends for that road to be very important for importing oil. That is why it is very important for both China and Pakistan to have an open border, because it allows China to have a very important trade route, and it allows Pakistan to receive Chinese investment. And Hunza is key in all of this because it is at the center of China and Pakistan. It is at the center of this border. If Gilgit Baltistan and specifically Hunza were to become part of India, as the Indian government wants, then this would mean that Pakistan and China would no longer share a border. So that is why India is interested at the end of the day, since Pakistan and China are its biggest rivals, and both would be hurt in the process. It's also worth noting, though, that Pakistan also claims territories which are currently controlled by India, which would also hurt India if Pakistan were to have them. So just please remember to be kind. I know this is highly controversial, but I do believe it is important in the history of Hunza, and that is why I think it's important to mention it. But again, please be kind in the comments or I will block you. Lastly, I want to talk about the people of Hunza and a really cool place I visited called Attabad Lakes. So when it comes to languages and culture, I think it is so interesting that even though Hunza is not a big valley, there are several languages that are spoken here, like Burushaski, Waki, and Shina. I'm really sorry if I mispronounced any of that, but I thought it was really interesting how much linguistic diversity a small valley like Hunza can hold. Something really interesting about Hunza as well is that it has a super high literacy rate. I think it's over 95%. And this is in large part because of the influence of the Aga Khan Mir. So the royal family in Hunza, which even though the royal family has no power nowadays, no governmental power, they're still alive, they still exist, and they have a foundation, which has contributed a lot towards building universities for higher education and towards the high literacy rate in Hunza, especially for girls. I also visited a place called Attabad Lake. So Attabad Lake was created in 2010 because of a landslide that unfortunately killed 20 people and left 8 injured, and it also submerged an entire village. So the landslide blocked the Hunza River for 9 months, and this lake was created as a result. I didn't film much while I was in the lake because it was freezing cold and my hands were so cold that I couldn't film. But this place has become a tourist attraction in Pakistan. So the people of Pakistan turned this massive tragedy into a tourist attraction and something that they could profit from. So they created opportunity from something terrible that happened in their community. And I think that is very admirable. This landslide actually submerged 26 kilometers of the Karakoram Highway, so that's super important road that connects China and Pakistan. And it was submerged for 5 years, and a new one was built actually by China, the Pakistan-China Friendship Road that connects two countries. But for 5 years, Pakistan and China were not connected via this road, and part of Pakistan was inaccessible. It was completely cut off from the rest of the country. So this is the end of this video. In my next video, I will talk about a really cool place called Pasu, which is in the Hunza area, and also a really cool valley called Naltar Valley here in Pakistan as well. So make sure you subscribe if you want to hear about those places, which are super, super beautiful and really, really cool. And you can also watch some of my other Pakistan content, such as my video about fairy meadows, and also my video about my first impressions of Pakistan as a European tourist when I was in Islamabad. So if you like this video, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.